Welcome back. Free lunch versus economic development. President Muhammadu Buhari says 5,000 naira stipend is for the vulnerable and not for the unemployed graduates. That was clarified in most of the, from the presidency, and it's in most of the media that the president has said it's not that the 5,000 naira will not be given out at all, but will only be given out to 1 million vulnerable Nigerians and not unemployed graduates, as most people have conceived it to be. So the choices the president has to make and where job seekers go from here is one of the many issues that will drive the conversation I'll be having now with a human capital development consultant, Mike Adele. Good morning to you, Mike, and thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Good morning.
It's, well, today is a mixed day because the rains have started here in Lagos, and there's traffic on the road, and a lot of people are boycotting the banks. So, which for you is which is tickling you right now?
All of the above.
Ha. In positive or negative?
Well, I would say it's raining, which is a good thing. It brings down all the dust and makes the atmosphere a little bit cooler. But the no banking issue, I think it's a serious issue as well, where there are terrible and ridiculous charges to every individual, millions of us in the country. And
we always have to remember that these charges is not just synonymous to Nigeria alone. These are bank charges. Well, maybe everybody would have their own side of the story. It depends on where it pinches you, and it depends on how well you understand what the banks are supposed to be doing. Yeah,
but we have multiple charges in here. Ridiculous, multiple charges. You have charges on transfer, you have charges on payments, you have charges on checks. At the end of the month, you have COT charges, and everything just comes up. And if you look at that charges, over millions of people, the banks are just ripping us off. It's as simple as that.
Well, stick around, and of course you listen to the conversation I'll be having later on with Mr. Ogubanjo, and you know, to get an understanding of where most customers just like you are coming from. But then listening or reading the papers yesterday with regards this removal or not giving the stipends to undergraduates, what was the first thought? Because it now seems as if the president says, you know what, there's no free lunch anymore for undergraduates, and this is something you're very passionate about. So no free lunch, but I'm going to be prioritizing some very key sectors of the economy that will create jobs and employ able-bodied undergraduates.
Thank you very much. Let me start with this. I mean, during this campaign that he actually promised free lunch, I mean the party promised free lunch and 5,000 naira to all unemployed graduates. I think the perception is before, during the campaign period, they actually estimated the amount of money they think or they thought will be in the treasury by the time they got in there. But unfortunately, I mean, to be honest with you, we have to be very frank with all this. I mean, I know from all quarters we're going to have a lot of people blaming and saying they're failing their promises. But the point is, I mean, you could actually anticipate and say, right, I'm going to do this and based on the figure that you think you have in there. But when they got in there, the treasury was empty. Now, they have to come back to tell us again that this is the situation, which we should understand. I mean, if we have the money in there and they're saying they can't do it, then it's a different thing. But we don't have the money in the first place. So the free lunch is gone, I mean, from what I've heard. Now, we're talking about the 5,000 stipend. Now, it was meant to be given to all the unemployed graduates, and we are having about 64% of unemployed youth in the country in the first place. So, for me, it's not feasible. Now, they now retracted and say for 1 million
vulnerable Nigerians.
Now, my question is this. I know they have good intention, but my question is this. How do you identify who qualifies for those, who are the vulnerable unemployed people? Now, if you backtrack, I mean, I've criticized the NBS severally on this platform. The National Bureau of Statistics will tell you this amount of people unemployed in the formal sector, in the informal sector. But the question is, we don't have a database. We don't have where to have this figure and say, this is exactly what we have.
If you go to the National Bureau of Statistics website, you will get that figure.
Well,
the number of jobs created in the informal sector, formal sector as well, you have those data there.
I can challenge that because obviously we don't have, go to any local rural area and tell me how do they quantify how many people are unemployed in there. We don't have the database. We don't have the structure, the infrastructure to actually go into the interiors of every part of the country to say how this and this are the number of people who are unemployed or are employed. So I'm not going to agree with those figures that are coming out. In every part of the world, they have a database. They have a structure. They have all accessories available that they can tell you this is the number of people who are this, who are B, who are A, but not in the system. So now the vulnerable he's talking about, my question is, how do you identify who actually the vulnerable unemployed graduates? From where? Anybody could come out and tell you I'm vulnerable, but you can identify it in this society. Now, going further, let's even assume, for example, that they could identify, for some reason, the 1 million people. That is 5,000 times 1 million, that's 5 billion every single month. Times 60, times 12, that's 60 billion. Now, going further, do you just pay them 5,000 naira every month, stipend every month? What happens from there? Sit on it? Do what with it?
So what should come first for you? Safety net, a social safety net for Nigerians, or economic growth, namely focusing on those key sectors of the economy that can create jobs and drive the economy?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I've always been advocating for this. I mean,
it's growth first?
Growth first.
Before your social safety net?
Yeah. Okay, let me give you a typical example. Now, the fastest growing, anybody could quote me wrong, one of the fastest growing sector in this economy is construction, property, everywhere. Now, I can tell you 80% of everything that happens that evolves around that property construction doesn't exist in Nigeria. The people, the tilers, the plumbers, the electricians, the structural engineers, and so on and so forth, they're non-Nigerians. They're from neighboring countries. So why don't we invest this money into our technical education? Gone are the days when we used to have our technical schools happened to be one of the best in the world in those days, where people go in to study tiling, plumbing, furniture, and so on and so forth. Well, if you don't give out this stipend. I keep saying it. It's not going to work. Give them that money for what? Even in the UK, where they give those money out, they're trying to do everything else. Now, if they give you that money in the UK, job seekers allowance, they give you a limited time. You're going to go and find work. You go to interviews every day. And if you miss your interview or you can't find work for a period of time, they take you off it.
But as a human capital development consultant, you've met a lot of people who are not suited particularly for some jobs. So you come out and you're a graduate and you're looking for a job. And you go for an interview and you're told that you're not qualified for this particular job. Then what?
Who do you blame? Also the government.
Why is it always the government's fault?
Okay, let me give an example. We used to have in those days, I remember that when I was little then, I mean, we used to have what we call school inspectors. School inspectors go around the country to every tertiary institution, from primary to tertiary institution, to go look into the curriculum, what you're studying, the quality of these courses, and so on and so forth. These days, we have half-baked graduates. The graduates come to you and they sit in front of you for an interview. They can't even speak good English. They can't write a good sentence, and you call yourself a graduate, so obviously you can't get a job. So why don't you put those money into restructure our curriculum, get inspectors out there, monitor and study, and to ensure that every private and public institution out there are actually delivering what they're supposed to deliver, not just teaching anybody anything.
So right now, it seems as if the federal government cannot afford this job seekers allowance, but can provide for 1 million vulnerable Nigerians. Are there any lessons that we can learn from any country that probably has had to contend with the kind of situation we have at the moment? Because it's not just, Nigeria is not just the only country that has kind of experienced this kind of thing at this time.
You say it's, the danger here is we're borrowing from others, which is allowed. But you can't just go and borrow a system from somewhere else that has been stabilized, structured for years back. We're talking about decades back. We couldn't just jump on it. Who are the people who actually has done the research, the analysis, and tell the government that this is going to work? Put this money into technical education. Tell all the graduates, what did you study? I studied mechanical engineering. I'm going to give you a training. Go to XYZ training school, technical education, and study practical mechanical engineering, civil engineering, plumbing, or if you want to change your course. Now, when these guys finish, they will get a job. But giving them 5,000, to do what? My question is, to do what? Is just to appease them or to tell them because they're suffering or something? It's not going to help them. Use that money in a different way to develop, to make them to acquire extra skills so they can be viable in the economy.
So what happens to those other schemes, those other initiatives that we've had in the past? You win, the GES, and the rest of it.
Okay, let me just say a few things about that. When the GIS came up, the graduate internship scheme, one of the shopping, I spoke about it here as well. Honestly, it was a fantastic scheme because it involves stakeholders, the employers and job seekers. And the government pays the job seekers 30,000
stipend as well.
Stipend every single month. But the good thing is, they go to an employer. An employer mentor them, manages them, grow them, give them skills for 1 year. At the end of the 1 year, if you are a very good employee, dedicated, hardworking, and so on and so forth, two things happen. Is either at the end of the one year period, the government and the employer says, I love what you do, you've become part of us, you've been productive, automatic employment, they employ you. Even if they don't employ you, it will be on your resume that you've worked with social company for 1 year. So nobody will tell you you don't have, you lack work experience. But the problem there is there are too many loopholes in that system, and I think there's massive corruption in there. And honestly, I could come inside and tell the government this is where the corruption is, because I saw it playing live. I'm one of the stakeholders, an employer that's on the scheme as an employer, and I saw it coming, and I could see the avenue where people could easily siphon money into their own pocket. So it failed. It would have been a perfect solution, but it failed.
That would have not really necessitated I beg your pardon, that would have not allowed necessitated the government to pay this 5,000 job seekers allowance. Tom Christine there. So where do job seekers go from here?
I think I would still go back to where I was talking about voluntary work scheme, where job seekers, you say, it's give and take. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's give and take. If you're not prepared to give something, you can't get anything. Now, this is a situation that all of us in this country are faced now. We have to sacrifice. Now, if all job seekers now says to themselves, but it has to involve the parent. It's not just by the government alone. The parent going to be involved as well. You tell your kids, go and work, apply to any company of your choice, and tell them you want to work for voluntarily with them for about 3 months, 6 months, thereabouts. And now people going to be saying, who's paying for my transport? The parent going to get involved with us. Now, this 5,000 the government is talking about could actually play a part in there. I say, okay, we'll pay the transport. Go and do voluntary work. We'll pay you 5,000 a month for your transport and your feeding, okay, to go do voluntary work. Now, the good thing is, if you go do voluntary work with an employer, it's a cost to the employer themselves because they're going to train you, mind you, your space and everything. But the good thing is, it will equip you with the necessary skills that you need. And in most cases, you will gain employment with such an employer. Because if you're dedicated and you're productive, then of course, with an employer voluntarily, you will gain. So, I mean, it's not about government alone now. The job seekers themselves got to be willing to give something. So they should also be saying to themselves, I want to go and do voluntary work so I could gain skill, help the employer. When the employer grows, I become part of them. So it's a win-win situation. That's where we are at the moment.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike, for coming on the program this morning and sharing your perspectives with us.
My pleasure.
Well, Business Morning continues in just a moment. I'll be joined later on by Mr. Adeolu Ogubanjo, who is the President, Consumer Rights Advancement Organization, as we talk about No Banking Day, the protest against bank charges. Join us again.